It's that time of year again. I had to break out the artificial lights. Hopefully it's not too harsh. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kendra and today I'm going to share with you everything I worked on in October. Today is October 31st. It is 8:14 p.m. on Halloween night. And I don't know about you guys, but we didn't get any candy. So I kept the porch light off and I took a Sharpie and wrote a little sign saying we don't have candy. And yeah, we had to disappoint some little kiddos this year and last year and every year that I've lived on my own as an adult because I'm lazy. I have four finished objects and 2 whips. So let's get into it. So the first finished object I have to share is a hat. It is a 2x2 hat by Anne Gagnon. This was a whip in the last video and I was very near the finish line on this project. Here's how it fits. I really like how this hat turned out. So when I talked about this project in last month's video, I kind of talked about how I knitted too long and I wasn't planning on ripping back and etc, etc, etc. I did knit it too long, longer than I like to knit hats. And so there's this little poofy bit at the top that the kids are loving these days. But I'm an out of touch millennial, so this is a new thing for me to try to wrap my head around, no pun intended. So I like it, even with this loose bit at the top, even though that wasn't necessarily my intended look when I cast this project on. I'm not mad at it. I like it a lot more than I thought I did. I mean, everything else about the hat is very basic. It is a free pattern on Ravelry. It comes in one size. I've knit it so many times in the past as a gift for other people. So I know how this hat was going to fit me more or less. I just kind of overshot the length a little bit and I wasn't sure how that was going to work out, but I'm not mad at it. Let me know what you guys think. Are you a fitted scully type of person? Do you like to wear your hats with a little room at the top like this one? So yeah, this is a 2x2 hat and I am really happy with it. Yarn I use is Patton's Classic Wool Worsted. I had a couple of balls left over from my ward sweater. That was a finished object last month. And just use some of that leftover yarn to knit this. And I have almost a full skein still, so I might knit another hat as a gift for a loved one. The next finished object I completed in October is a scarf. And I have never knit a scarf before, I realized. This is the Solo Scarf by K-Dree. It is a sort of a long triangular shaped shawl scarf situation. The pattern as written has you knit it to a point and then you cast on one end, knit to the maximum number of stitches, increasing and then decreasing at the same rate. So it creates a really obtuse triangle. Am I using that word right? Obtuse? I think so. I did add a few rows in the middle section here. So mine doesn't come quite to a point because I wanted some extra length. But in general, I think mine looks very similar to the pattern as it was designed. The yarn I use is Lion Brand's Fisherman Wool in the color Nature's Brown, which is a beautiful heathered brown color. I really do like this yarn. It is on the scratchier side. I'm not so sure how well this is going to work for me as a piece that I'm going to have right on my neck and my face. I've worn it a couple of times and I haven't really had an issue, so that's promising. But that's something to consider when making accessories like scarves or cowls, is like, how is that yarn going to feel up against your neck? So far, so good. I can't complain. I'm not so sure I love the whole pointed tip aspect of it. As far as scarves, I am very much accustomed to the traditional scarf silhouette that is just really a really long rectangle. Nothing super fancy going on at the ends. No type of increasing or other shaping aspects happening. So I kind of find this difficult when I put it on to kind of zhuzh it in a way that feels natural and comfortable for me. So it could be a matter of me just getting used to this shape of scarf. What I really want as far as a neck accessory for the winter is like, I have a couple of cowls and I kind of concluded that I'm a cowl person, but I'm really intrigued by the whole Dickie collar situation. I just think as a neck accessory, it's a bit more efficient. It makes sense to me because one thing I don't like is with cowls and the cowls that I've knit, they have a tendency to sort of pull and bunch up at the base of the neck. They make it really awkward to zip up a coat comfortably. And in general, I just don't like a lot going on in my neck area. So whenever I wear the cowls that I've knit myself, I find myself fiddling with them a lot, moving things around, I feel like almost like I'm being suffocated. Like there's just too much going on here. And I feel like a Dickie or a collar where the shaping is intentionally designed to lay flush against your neck and drape over your shoulders in a way that feels very natural and would cause no bunching fabric. It just sounds genius, and that is an accessory I want to explore. So at some point in the near future, I want to cast on a Dickie or a collar. I don't know what the technical term is. That's a tangent. The point is, I like it, but I don't know if the silhouette is something that I can easily wear in my day-to-day life. This was a spontaneous cast on. This was actually a test knit for Kadri. She put out a call for testers, and the testing deadline was like a week turnaround. It's a very simple pattern, so I understand for the most part, and she was flexible with us and ended up extending the deadline, but I don't think she needed a lot from the testers in the way of commentary, feedback, fixing errors, things like that. If there's anything wrong with the pattern, we more or less kind of caught on to it as soon as we cast it on. So there wasn't a lot of kinks to iron out with the test knitting process. So I understand why the turnaround was so short, but I was kind of freaking out just a little bit. I did not make the original deadline. So I'm glad she ended up extending it. And I'm glad I knit it. I think last month I said I was going to knit the Almina shawl by, I can't remember the designer's name, but this is what I made instead. So that project plan is no longer even relevant. But yeah, so this is the solo scarf. My next finished object that I have to share was a whip in the last video. And it was kind of like a sad situation because I kind of shared that I had fallen behind on my 1 sock a month goal. I am happy to say I am back on track. If you follow me on Instagram, I've already posted about these, but I finished a pair of socks. Yay! So these are the Cider House socks by Summerly Knits. It's a really simple cable pattern, alternated with 2x2 rib. There are 3 yarns called for in the pattern. I realized after casting on and getting a good way through the main section of this sock that the colors are very Gryffindor house. I'm not mad at it, but it's definitely giving Gryffindor. If you know, you know. So the colors, the yarns I used, honestly, I'm not... the main color, I have no idea. It was a hand-dyed yarn that I got from Die Hard Yarns in Oak Brook, Illinois, as a part of the 2022 Chicago Yarn Crawl. And the cream tweed color at the cuff and toes. This is from Duchess of Dye Pots in the layered base, which is a tweed sock base. And the color is Yeti. And then the sort of dark brown burgundy stripe in the cuff. This is Knit and Bro. And I think the colorway is called Hot Chocolate, but I'm not 100% sure. I got that from Miss Pearl a year or two ago. And the Duchess of Dye Pots yarn I got from Portland, Oregon when I went with my husband back in September of 2022. So I remember more about these yarns than I realized I did after having to recite them just now. But yeah, it is a really great pattern. I shared in my last video that the first sock I ended up having to start over because I cast on a size that ended up being too small because ribbing and cables, go figure, makes for a tighter fabric, and I didn't account for that. So these are actually the size extra large. I have pretty wide feet and I have pretty large feet. Like, I'm not ashamed to say that I wear a women's US size 11 and a half to 12. So generally speaking, if I'm knitting socks, I'm knitting the largest size. It is what it is. This case is no exception. I'm just really glad that going up a size gave me the room that I needed for these to fit comfortably. I'm so glad they're done. I would definitely knit this again. The cabling got me for a little bit. For a good portion of the first sock, I had to knit the cables with a cable needle because I just wasn't used to how slippery the stitches were, or I wasn't used to knitting cables with such thin, slippery yarn. But eventually I got into the rhythm, and the rest of the first sock and all of the second sock I was able to knit up without the help of a cable needle. And yeah, it made it a lot easier to get through. I have no complaints when it comes to Summerly knits. This is the first pattern I've purchased from her, or at least the first paid pattern that I've knit of hers. But my go-to vanilla sock pattern is the I'm So Basic Socks by Summerly Knits. So just based on the pattern writing style, I knew her style of writing a basic heel flap and gusset sock just makes sense to my brain because I've knitted so many times. So I knew that this pattern would sort of intuitively make sense for me, and I was right. And I'm glad I made them. And this is a pattern I hope to revisit in the future. So yay, one sock a month. So my fourth and final finished object of October, I finished the pitch coat. Oh my gosh. I can't believe it's finished. So this is the pitch coat by Emily Green. It is a masterpiece of epic proportion. Now, I won't spend a ton of time talking about this because my plan is to create a standalone video sharing all of the details, my experience knitting it, etc., etc. But as I mentioned before, this is my knitting Mount Everest. This has been an aspirational knit of mine for so long, and I'm so happy it's done, and I'm so happy with how it turned out for the most part, and we'll talk about that. But it is complete, and I'm thrilled. So I finished the actual knitting at the very beginning of October, and for the remainder of the month, I proceeded to just procrastinate on finishing the seaming. So I did I would say like 40 to 50% of 30 to 40% of the seaming I kind of did in the first part of October, and then I sat it down because I was focusing on catching up on my 1 sock a month challenge. And then I finished those socks and I cast on my next sock for next month because I just couldn't find the right time to sit down and work on this. I mean, I plan at some point to sit down and do a video kind of covering my perspective on some pros and cons of knitting seamed garments. But one of the cons is that seaming is not a very portable, pick up whenever type of step in the whole making process. And so work has been very busy. I got a promotion. But, work has been really busy. I've been working more hours than I usually do, and the days are draining mentally. And I found that at the end of the day, the last thing I wanted to do is pull out these random pieces of fabric and hunch over them to get this project seamed. I just wasn't in the mental headspace to do that, if I'm totally honest. So part of it was procrastinating because I didn't want to do it. The other part of it was just like, I really could not find the right moment to just sit down and do it. Eventually, this past weekend, I finally just sat down and I dedicated like 3 or 4 hours to finishing up all the seaming and weaving in all the ends. I don't know if I showed that footage, but here are all of the ends. It's a weird thing I do. I just kind of hold on to them once I weave them in. But there were a lot of ends here. I'm not going to pull them out and count them because it'll make me sad, but it was a task. Seaming and weaving the ends on a seamed garment is a big time commitment. And it's not one of those steps in the process where you can just pick up whenever you feel like making some progress on it. You kind of have to carve out the physical space and the mental space to sit down and get it done. And I just found those opportunities very lacking this past month. And as a result, what could have been done on like October 3rd didn't end up being finished until the end of October, basically. Better late than never, am I right? This was a huge ego knit for me. I'm not even gonna lie. I feel pretty confident after knitting something like this, if I do say so myself. There are 2 things that I would do differently if I could jump in a TARDIS, go back in time, and start this project again. One is the size I chose. This doesn't have the oversized fit that I was kind of anticipating. If you compare how this fits my body compared to, for example, the model and the sample pictures for this pattern, where the model's able to sort of wrap herself up in it, I have about 1.5 inches of overlapping fabric when I pull the fronts of the cardigan together. It fits very comfortably, and nobody's gonna look at me wearing this and think, oh, that's too small for her. But it's not the fit that I wanted. The other thing that I would probably change is the pockets, and I just wouldn't do them. I chose to modify the pockets and do an inset pocket instead of seaming it or knitting it separately and seaming it onto the front of the cardigan. The inset pocket is basically, I just knit the opening for the pocket as I knit up the front panel. And I went and picked up the stitches on the inside to knit the inside of the pocket here. And then I picked up the stitches on the outside to knit the edging of the pocket here. I think it looks fine, honestly. This one, not as good if I'm if I'm being totally transparent. This pocket, she's struggling a little bit. She's a little lopsided, okay. We got a little puckering there. But nothing that I deem worthy of the work it would take to go back and fix it. So for now, the pockets are what they are. I think overall, I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. And I'm so happy it's done. I'm so happy it's done. So that is the last finished object I completed in October. So I ended October on a very high note by finally completing my pitch coat. And now I think we can get into some works in progress. So the first work in progress I have to share is my November sock. I got a head start, like I said, as I was sort of procrastinating on seaming this cardigan. I cast on a whole sock and I made some good progress on it. So here's what we have so far. If you're thinking this yarn looks familiar, that's because it is. So the yarn I'm using for these socks is the same yarn I use for the toe and the cuff of my Cider House socks. So the pattern is the Cider House socks. No, it's not. This is the Decathlon Socks by, this pattern is called the Decathlon Sock by Sue Granfield. And it's a very basic sock. As we can see, I've finished the heel turn and I'm currently working on the gusset. It's knit in garter rib. So there are 18 rounds of 2x2 rib at the cuff. And this is a free pattern on Ravelry, by the way. Followed by the main fabric, which is a garter rib or a 2x2 broken rib, which is a 2-row repeat. On row 1, you do knit 2, purl 2, and on the second round, you do knit all the way around. And you keep alternating those 2 rounds basically throughout the entire main fabric of the sock. That's really it. I did a slip stitch, heel flap, and gusset, which, to be totally honest, I don't even know if the pattern as written calls for this. I kind of just went into autopilot and did the heel flap and gusset instructions from the I'm So Basic Socks by Summerly Knits. Yeah, not much to say about these. Again, I do like this yarn. I like the tweed yarn. I'm still very much in my textured sock era, but I wanted to pick a texture pattern that wouldn't get drowned out by the tweed yarn. And I also didn't want something super complex. So I didn't want to do anything cabled or lace where I'd have to memorize a long repeat or follow the chart. I wanted to do something relatively mindless, especially after coming off the Cider House socks. I kind of wanted texture, but I didn't want something too complicated. But I didn't want something that was just a vanilla sock. So this, I think, was the perfect sweet spot. And I would highly recommend this pattern if you need a new free pattern to work on. So yeah, I made quite a bit of progress here because this is a really addictive pattern. Like, it was at times very difficult for me to put this down. And do other things I needed to, like, I don't know, seam my pitch coat. So very welcome distraction if you're procrastinating, and just in general, a really fun but simple sock pattern, and I would recommend it. So yeah, these will be my November socks. So the next whip I have to share is actually a self-drafted pattern. So I am using this book. This is the Knitter's Handy Book of Top-Down Sweaters. This is a book I have used before once to make my infamous poop cardigan that I've talked about before. Yeah, it's a really cool book. My mom got it for me a couple of years ago, I think for Christmas or my birthday or something like that. And while I was really grateful for it, I didn't know if I would get good use out of a book like this. Like, I'm not a knitwear designer. I'm not a super creative person. So I didn't think I find many opportunities to make up an entire pattern from scratch. Well, not from scratch, because this book kind of has all of the numbers, all of the increases based on your gauge and what size you want to make. So it's very much an already written pattern. I'm just kind of adding my own thing to it. So the reason I'm knitting a pattern using this book is because I want to recreate this sweater. So this is a store-bought sweater from the Levi's store. I got it like 13 years ago, and my dad actually got it for me as a Christmas gift one year. Well, he bought it for me as a Christmas gift. I picked it out. And yeah, my body has changed over the last 13 years. This doesn't fit as comfortably as it used to. And since getting into knitting, this has kind of always been a project that I've wanted to attempt recreating in a hand knit version. So I used the book I talked about to put the numbers together and figure out a way to recreate it, which is a lot easier than it probably sounds. So the yarn I'm using to recreate is, the top of the yoke is going to be Woolstock Worsted by Blue Sky Fibers in the color Highland Fleece, which is this cream color, and the color on the bottom is going to be Gravel Road. So that's what they look like together. I think I'm achieving, at least with the yarn I picked, I'm achieving the intended look. Now it's a matter of knitting it up and executing it. So I cast on a couple days ago, and this is what I have so far. Yeah, not much to show. I just worked through the second round of increases, and I switched it to the longer cord, which is an exciting milestone. I don't have much to say about this. This is another project that I'm going to make a dedicated video to sort of cover my experience making this. One thing I will say is the pattern or the book for the circular yoke basic recipe that it has in the book, it does not include short rows. So I added some. I've never added short rows where short rows weren't already established in the pattern. So I don't know if I spaced them correctly or if I did the best job. I mean, I've done so many short rows before, but I second guessed myself every step of the way. And if I hold it up like this, there's about an inch of extra fabric peeking up at the back. So I don't even know if the short rows I did are going to make a noticeable improvement in the fit. I really don't know. I just knew that it would probably be in my best interest to incorporate short rows. I just don't know. I don't know if I did it right or if, I don't know. I don't know. So once I knit some more of the yoke and add the collar, I'll probably do a steam block and a impromptu try on to see if it's doing what I want it to do. I think it's kind of hard to screw up. I mean, even if the short rows aren't raising the back of the neck to the extent that I wanted it to, I could always add more short rows lower in the yoke. And worst case scenario, it doesn't make a dramatic difference and the fit doesn't rise up as much as I needed to in the back. I don't think it's the end of the world. But yeah, that was for some reason really stressful for me because I just thought I was screwing it up somehow. But yeah, added the short rows. Everything else I'm knitting as it's written in the recipe from the book. And I'm going to add color work to mimic the inspiration. So if we take another look at the inspiration pattern here, it's just a very basic zigzag pattern that grows around the chest and the sleeves. And if we zoom in here, we can see that the color work actually starts immediately after the body and the sleeves are split, which makes it a lot easier because I didn't have to figure out how this color work was going to fit across the entire shoulders and chest before splitting for sleeves. For some reason, the fact that the color work starts after the sleeve split makes it easier for my brain to process. I don't know why, but it does. And looking at the inside of the color work, this is not something that I necessarily need to replicate, but it does look like there's some ladder back jacquard, I think it's called, technique happening on the inside. And I would love to learn that technique for this project, just because I've heard that it helps keep the color work tension even and catching the floats in a way that doesn't show through on the front of the fabric, and also keeps some stretch in the color work. So I'm gonna try my hand at it when I get to that point in the project. And of course, I will keep you guys updated on how it works up. So that's all I have to share as far as knitting this month. The numbers, we want to know the numbers. I know you want to know the numbers. So in the month of October, I used 3,226 yards and I didn't buy any yarn. So that brings my year-to-date totals. I have used 12,767 yards. I've acquired 2,997 yards, and my net impact is a stash reduction of 9,770 yards. I think in my last video, I mentioned wanting to aim for a 10,000 yard stash reduction. And at this rate, it is absolutely going to happen. I don't plan on buying any yarn in November and December. Although my mom might get me some yarn as a Christmas gift. So we'll see on that one. But I do think the 10,000 yards of stash reduce is a totally feasible goal at this point, and I am really, really excited about it. I'll talk more in the coming videos on what the future of the no buy is going to look like. I'm very, very tempted to extend it well into 2024, mainly because, for one, it's been really satisfying to work through my stash this past year. And even saying that, I feel like I didn't work through as much of my stash as I anticipated, For some reason in my mind, I thought I was just gonna crank out one sweater and a sock a month, and that's just not realistic for me. And I'm sure it's not realistic for most of you guys out there. So I feel like the pace at which I've been knitting this year is probably half of the pace I anticipated going into the year. So I have several sweater quantities still in my stash, untouched, that I kind of figured would be knit up by this point in the year. And I'm not disappointed that they haven't been, but it's just been a lesson in being more realistic with my expectations and understanding what my real pace of knitting is, and also factoring in life things that are going on. Life happens, and just leave it at that. But I am still very eager to continue to work through my stash, and I don't know what that's going to look like in 2024, but I'm definitely going to buy as little as possible, and I'll just leave it there. I'll put some more thought into it, but at this point I see no reason why I should end the no buy when I have so much yarn in my stash that can keep me occupied for the next 12 to 18 months, if I'm totally honest. So let me know what you think of this month's videos and what you think of my projects. That is all I have to share with you for the month of October. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.